of us in some ways are cookie thieves. I have 8 beautiful children. Our youngest little girl's 8 years old. One of the things that you do when you become enlightened and become a guru, like me, that'll be the day, is when we place something that is important to know where it is, we practice mindfulness so that we never misplace anything. So obviously, having reached this exalted level of awareness in my home with my 8 children, I never misplace anything. So I place my keys right here in a certain spot. But my little girl has this wonderful habit of taking my keys and hiding them on Daddy in the morning so that she can watch me flip out as I look for the keys. And I'll say, Sage, how many times has Daddy told you, don't hide my keys in the morning? Daddy, you told me not to do it. I don't hide your keys anymore. Come on, where'd you put my keys? The last time they were in your dollhouse, where did you put them? Daddy, you told me not to do it. And then, of course, my 12-year-old daughter, Serena, loves to just assume this stance. She's watching me raise my voice. She'll say, I wonder what all those people would think of Mr. Positive if they could see him right now. Get lots of reminders. So I give up. I say, look, when I come back out here, I want those keys here. And I go back and I get my clothes on and I reach in my back pocket, and there are my keys. Right where I had left them the night before, in my pocket. And there's a fine line, I think, between being a guru and being a jerk, all right? And I probably crossed that line more times than I should be admitting here on television. But this idea of being a cookie thief and creating a knowing is something. I did a benefit along with my wife a couple of years ago with a man on Maui whose name is Michael Knopf, who had been injured in an accident. He's a quadriplegic or paraplegic. And at that meeting, when it was over, there was a man who lived on another one of the islands who was known as a kahuna, a healer, an ancient healer from Polynesia. And he was introduced to me, and he said that was a nice talk and so on. And I said, how do you get to be a kahuna? You know, do you take Kahuna 101? I mean, what courses do you take? How does this work out? And he said, no. He said, kahunas are raised to have no doubt. To have no doubt. To have a knowing. And he said, when a knowing confronts a belief in a disease process, the knowing will always triumph. And that knowing is something in which you say, you are healed, and healing takes place. One of the great stories of knowing is, again, with our little girl, Sage, who we were spending the summer in our summer home, and we went to visit this dermatologist. And Sage has had this thing called flatwarts for the last, well, since she was 2.5 years old. From 2.5 until 7, which is over 4 years, she had these flatwarts, and not only did she have them around her face, around her mouth, and around her nose, but they were getting worse. They were moving up, and they were getting up around her eyes and so on, and we noticed that they were getting progressively worse, even though all of the places that we had taken her had said, they will go away. She'll outgrow them. But it didn't seem to be that way, and they always said it would be a few months. Well, years had gone by, and she still hadn't. So we were over at my friend's, this dermatologist in Kihei, and I said, Kenny, as long as we're here, would you mind taking a look at Sage? And my wife was there, and he took these big white light, and he put it in her face, and he said, you've got flatwarts. She hates that term. She never wanted to call them flatwarts. She calls them her bumps. All right? She just called them her bumps. So he said to her, but the good news is that when you get married, you won't have them. Well, she's 7.5, going, oh, who is this dork you've got me talking to now? And then he said to her something. He said, you know, we can't burn them off, and there's no medicine that we can give them. But he did say something to the effect that the ability to rid yourself of these things is within yourself. And that if you can call upon that healing capacity in you and begin to talk to these bumps in a way in which you ask them to leave, that you have a much greater chance of getting rid of them faster than anything that I could give you, and we certainly can't burn them off because we might scar your pretty face. And that's basically the message that he gave us. I'm paraphrasing it. So we went back that night to where we were staying, and there was a whole bunch of kids there, as there always are when we're staying, and all of their friends were there. And we walked into the bedroom, and it was late at night, and over in the corner, on her air mattress, was Sage. And she had the blankets pulled up over her head, and she had a flashlight underneath the blankets. And I went over and I lifted up the blanket. I said, honey, is everything all right? She said, shh, I'm talking to my bumps. And I left the room and I came into my wife in the other bedroom. And I said, honey, you're not going to believe this, but Sage is in there talking to her bumps. Isn't that great? The next night we did the same thing. That was the second night. The third night, the same thing. Now that was on Friday. This happened on Monday. On Friday, as God is my witness, on television, every single one of those bumps was gone and has never reappeared since. A knowing. You see, there is a stream of healing that is something that we can plug into. It's very much like electricity. People say, well, in ancient Greece there was no electricity. There was electricity. We just didn't plug into it. That's all. And there's a stream of healing. And when we go into that stream of healing with a knowing, we go to a higher level within ourselves. And we don't allow any doubt in. Basically, in every single one of us, every human being out there, there are two of us. There's two people. The first person in each person is called the ego, or I call it the ego. E-G-O. Earth guide only. All right? This is the part of us that says who I am is separate from you, separate from God, separate from my environment, and therefore I'm in competition with, and my value is based upon how much I get, how much my stuff is worth, how much better looking I might be, or how much more attractive I might be, how much more money I might have, the value of my possessions, and so on. What is mine? So it's not mystical awareness which says I am connected. It is that individual lower level of awareness which says my ego. This is mine. Also in each and every one of us there's another person. And this other person is called what I call the sacred self, or the higher self. And this sacred or higher self really doesn't care how much you get. It doesn't care who you're better than. It doesn't care how much stuff you have. It's not interested in any of that. The problem is that we very seldom listen to it. We pay very little attention to it. This higher or sacred part of us wants only one thing. It wants us to be at peace. At peace. Whatever choice you make in every interaction you have, make the choice to be at peace, your sacred or higher self says. Whereas your ego says, oh, no, 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 no. It's much more important to be right. And so we find people in relationships struggling a lot. And one of the things that they struggle about is who's right and who's wrong. Most of the fights that you have in your relationships really basically, oftentimes you forget the details. But it's basically about who's right and who's wrong. So that if you want to have your higher or your sacred part of you ruling in your life, I suggest this to you. Practice being kind rather than right. When you have the choice, and you have the choice in your relationships with your spouse and your ex-spouse, with your parents, with your grandparents, with your in-laws, with strangers on the freeway, with flight attendants, with waiters, with whomever you interact, if you can just subdue this ego part of you which says, it's important for me to be right, which will introduce you to stress and anxiety and fear and so much of the stuff that I talked about earlier, and instead say, how can I suspend this part of me and allow the part of me that wants to be at peace, that wants to be happy, that wants to be fulfilled. And if I said to you, I'm going to give you a magic wand, and with this magic wand, I am going to allow you to just wave it and get anything that you want. Whatever you want. You can have this, you can have this car, you can have these nice clothes over here, you can have this home, whatever it is. Or I said to you, in lieu of that, I'm going to give you another wand, and you can wave this, and for every moment for the rest of your life, you'll be at peace. Whatever comes along, you'll be able to choose peace. And basically, we know that we're only here for a very short time. And being able to choose peace, which is what the sacred part of you begs you, the higher self. Once you get that, you begin to shift away, and you stop telling yourself that the people who are close to me, in relationship with me, are the people who don't belong there. I remember my wife and I, we often talk about this, and we've been together a long time. We've had many children together, and we have a very wonderful, loving relationship. Thank you. But we'd often, and one time I said to her, or she said to me, you know, we love each other, but this doesn't sound like love. Sometimes the way we talk to each other doesn't sound like love. Let's practice with each other, being kind rather than being right. And it was transformative. That when we had that walk, and doing that with your children, and doing that with a waiter. I mean, a waiter who comes to you and is like, you know, hassled and frazzled and has been busy and all of that, and your ego says, wait a minute, I'm here and I'm important, and I have a right to be served, and I have a right to be served now. That's the ego part of you. If you can suspend that and say, you know, you are a lucky man tonight. You got somebody who's dealing from his sacred self. And I understand. And you take your time, and you come to me, and you bring it at your convenience, whenever you can. I'm willing to suspend my... And you know what? You'll get served so fast, and with such gratitude, just for being kind, if you practice it. Every single one of us are in relationship, whether it's with our husbands and wives, with our ex-husbands and wives, with our children, our grandchildren, whether it's with people we drive along the freeway next to, whether it's with waiters and waitresses or baggage handlers or flight attendants or people that we are in line to get into the movie. We're all in relationships, and we interact with each other all the time. And probably the best lesson that I've ever learned in my life about how to be in a relationship in a way which is powerful and happy and fulfilling is to remember this sentence. When you have a choice, and you always do, to be right or to be kind, start picking kind. The ego part of us wants to be right. How dare you not serve me as fast as I think I deserve to be served? How dare you say something to me? And immediately we want to make that other person wrong and make ourselves right. But there's a part of each one of us that wants to be happy, wants to be at peace. And that part of us says, it doesn't matter whether you're right. It doesn't matter about your ego. All you want is to be at peace, so pick kind. This kind of an attitude, if we had more of this, not only in our own personal lives, would we improve virtually every relationship we have with all of the people closest to us and all of the strangers we interact with, but on our planet as well, we would begin to understand the wisdom that on a round planet, there's no choosing up sides, that we're all one. We're all breathing the same air. We're all drinking the same water. We're all being warmed by the same sun. And as they say, as the Native Americans used to say, no tree has branches so foolish as to fight among themselves. It applies in your relationships, and it applies as a people as well.